If you're looking for a build with very high strengths and very few drawbacks, the conditioned shortbow Soul Beast build is one for you. For the strengths, survival. With healing, spring and bear stance, you can remove conditions not just off yourself, but off your entire group. With 3 dodges, you're much more survivable. Attacking at range also creates that barrier between you and an enemy, making sure that you're not hit by mechanics that are quite hard to see or quite quick. You also heal from poison damage. This increases your healing output and also gives you that extra bit of survivability. As a Soul Beast, down state 3, it allows your pet to come to your aid and rescue you, which can be very clutch in some big situations. A pet that can also tank and almost instant heal on a very short cooldown allows you to tank high and dangerous targets. For DPS, expect about 8 to 15k on landscape with no boot. Another positive is super simple rotation. The only skills is your F3 and your shortbow 5 that need to be used 10 seconds apart to ensure you have the best DPS uptime. Piercing damage not only means better AoE but also better tagging, so as you go into meta events, you're getting the most loot possible. Super easy and cheap to gear, and good for all strikes. Lower tier fractals and some raids, you will actually end up top of the DPS meter. And as for the weaknesses, falls off at higher tier raiding and fractals. Unfortunately, power DPS is always going to be one of those things that fractals will prefer. And also in terms of raiding, obviously Snowcrows have got best builds covered. This isn't a build that's going to be hitting 40k DPS on a dummy, but at the same time it will compete pretty well with a lot of those big builds because of the DPS uptime, with a few of the extra things that you'll see in the build. Let's have a quick look at the armor. You can either use the same stats and gear as the Condition Untamed or straight Vipers, what's easiest for you to get a hold of. You obviously want Rune of the Create. The focus is bleed duration. You want to try to get your bleed duration up to 85% and above. With food that will equate to 100%, as we're focusing predominantly on bleeds to try to do majority of our damage, with some poison damage being added to it. You want one short bow with bursted sigil and the sigil of earth for a little bit of extra condition damage and more bleeds. Let's go over the specializations. Like most Soul Beast builds, you're going to go into skirmishing. You want obviously sharpen edges for some bleeds, hidden bobs for some more bleeds, and this is kind of where there is kind of 2 ways you can go. I highly recommend for the shortbow build light on your feet. It creates piercing on shortbow skills, and also every single time you dodge for 4 seconds you'll receive a buff to damage and duration, especially on condies, which make them really good. There is another build that goes for quick draw, and especially if you want to use axe for your offhand. For the build I am showing you, I do recommend light on your feet. Also, take note of Hunter's tactics. If you attack from behind or the sides, you basically get extra damage and extra crit chance. Pretty massive. The next part, I go for Beast Mastery. There is a build where you can go into Wilderness Survival, and that is at the current point the current condition Soul Beast build, which might change. The reason why I go into Beast Mastery is more for the landscape aspect. Like you can take out of Resounding Timber if you're not going to take Sikkim. And there is a few other options. In Nature's Healing you can also take off. And also Beastly Warden, I highly recommend this for landscape. You can obviously change to Honed Axes if you're taking axe on your offhand. But the reason why I go for Beastly Warden is for the landscape taunt. Remember, you have 2 pets that you can switch between, that you can absorb and release to heal them back up to full health. And their pet abilities create a taunt, which will basically pull big mobs off of you. This is basically how you will solo champs and bounties on landscape. Obviously we're into Soul Beast. A couple of extra boons on an F3 skill. This is a very important one. Predator's Cunning allows you to heal when you poison. Very important for a survival aspect. And then Leader of the Pack. You can obviously switch out of Leader of the Pack anytime you want to. But the reason why I keep this is for a bit of personal DPS on landscape, although mostly for raiding, just to provide that special unique boon to other people. Very, very important to know twice as vicious. Extra damage and condition damage every single time you CC or disable in skill on a foe, shall I say. Very important. That is obviously where shortbow 5s, stun, and obviously your F3 skill will work with their 20-second cooldowns to basically be used 10 seconds apart to try heighten your DPS as much as possible. This is mostly for strikes, raids, and fractals. On landscape, you're not going to care too much about doing big DPS, although if you can and you're in a bigger meta group where you don't have to hold the attention of a bigger mob, this is obviously very important to do. Let's have a look at the utilities. For now, you've seen kind of the pros and cons of the build, but what makes it special? Like I said in the strengths and weaknesses, the Healing Spring and Bear Stance make you very survivable and allow you to remove conditions off of yourself and off of allies. I way prefer the Healing Spring, as the visual indicator on the ground is so nice for people to see. They can run in, cleanse conditions and move out, making it effectively not just a 5-man cleanse, possible 10-man cleanse if used correctly. Whereas Bear Stance is 5 targets and lasts for 6 seconds, although still very, very good. Where Healer's 1 is obviously a very, very important skill to use when raiding. It increases boon durations and helps a little bit with some other things. I use it in certain fights like maybe Veiled Guardian. I find it's very strong, where you know there's not going to be any conditions to be removed, and where maybe you might branch off from the pack and maybe want a little bit of boon duration to go with you. Sharpened Stones and Vulture Stance are almost non-negotiables. They're part of most condition builds and are just so good. Obviously big bleed damage, which is what this build focuses on completely, and poison for some healing and some condi DPS. The third utility slot is completely up to you, and there's lots of good ones to choose from. Mower Stance for a bit of extra boon duration can be quite clutch in a lot of raiding instances. Sikkim, very good for some initial burst DPS and obviously some boons because of Resounding Timber. Protect Me, bit of extra barrier, and a Sunbreak. A very nice one, Search and Rescue, especially in a lot of meta events like Drakkar and maybe Dragon's End, to help just pull an ally out of a dangerous situation and raise them. Even can be used in some raids, although highly not recommended. A few of your extra signets, maybe for invulnerability, some toughness, movement speed and the like. Obviously all very, very good choices. But also consider Signet Trap for a little bit of extra CC and bleed. Viper's Nest for a bit of poison, which equates to some healing. And those are very good options to choose from. You can obviously go into almost anything you want to, and I highly recommend having a look at all of them and trying them all out at some point. In terms of elite skills, I always keep one Wolf Pack. It is such a strong build, mostly for landscape. It's okay, but in raiding and strikes, it increases everybody's DPS, and everybody loves that. Nature's Spirit could come in handy in some fights if you need to or expect your entire party to go down, maybe due to failed mechanics. Although as a non-healer, it's going to be tough to keep him alive the whole time, but 5 target raise can be pretty big. Entangle for a big bleed and big immobilized duration can be pretty huge, especially in some raid fights and even on landscape where you're trying to keep mobs away from certain objectives. If not, Strength of the Pack is always good for a bit of stability and a few extra boons. Not bad at all. Let's have a quick look at the rotation. The rotation is super simple. The idea behind the rotation is to use your F3 skill when you're in melee range, or your shortbow 5 skill when you're at range, within 10 seconds of each other to maintain twice as vicious, and use all the other skills off cooldown. You might maybe want to save your shortbow 3 for an extra dodge, but everything else can be just used off cooldown. And that's about it. You should be able to hit pretty hard at a raid, even on the golem. And a few tips and tricks. Remember that soul beasts do more damage from flanking or behind. Also, a lot of your skills gain extra abilities when used either from flanking or behind. This means that you predominantly want to be behind the target or at flank. Using shortbow 2 as close to the target as possible to make sure that all 5 arrows penetrate into the target, especially if you're fighting something big like a bounty or a boss. Remember though, staying at range can mean more survivability, so gauge the situation. Take a utility that you feel is going to help you in the fight, whether you need more CC or perhaps more some survival. Making sure also to use crippling shot for a bit of immobilize can help you a lot. Remember, all your skills pierce. Targeting the furthest away enemy and shooting through all of them can mean that not only will you kill them quicker, but you might end up getting a little bit more loot as well. For more on this build and others just like it, catch me streaming on Twitch. Stop by anytime and hang out. If you found this helpful, please subscribe and share with some friends. It will really help grow the channel.